Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, here joined by Alex and Matt, and it's the Development Hell podcast. And this is, I guess, technically episode 4. And our third different topic, we're going to be focusing on our favorite movie monologues. But before we jump into our monologues, we got a lot of content has been coming out on streaming and in theaters, which honestly we could spend a whole entire show just talking about all the movies that got pushed back within the past 2 weeks since we've met for the podcast, because a lot of movies are going to 2021. So next couple of months are going to be pretty bare. But what we got coming, so this Wednesday, so like the 30th, yeah, September 30th, Amazon dropped The Glorias, which is a biopic about Gloria Steinem, who was a famous activist in terms of women's rights. This film is starring 4 actresses who play Steinem over the course of her life, over the course of this 2.5-hour biopic, including Julianne Moore, Alicia Vikander, Lulu Wilson, who was in Annabelle Creation, and I do not remember the littlest girl who played her in this film, but you have 4 Glorias. You have Janelle Monáe, Bette Midler. Are you going to be greenlighting this 2.5-hour biopic about Gloria Steinem, or are we sending it back to development hell? Alex?
It's funny every time you do that, especially now it's October, because I keep hearing like people playing like Michael Jackson's Thriller, so the Vincent Price laugh.
I could have talked about Vincent Price's monologue from Thriller.
Oh, sorry, no, Alex, go.
All right. Now, who's the lead in it?
I guess technically Julianne Moore plays the oldest version of Gloria Steinem, okay. And then Alicia Vikander plays her. It's not like a standard biopic. Like the actresses actually interact with each other.
Oh, cool.
It's not like a by the numbers biopic. So it's a little bit more ambitious than that.
Julianne Moore has done such great stuff over the years. I mean, ever since Boogie Nights, she's done so many good things. So, yeah, I'm not going to send that back to development hell. Not quite yet. No, that sounds actually really interesting. And I don't know a whole lot about Gloria Steinem. So yeah, I'm not sending it back.
All right. How about you, Matt? I think we lost Matt. So
Matt really doesn't like this idea.
Nope. Matt froze because he cannot stand this idea. Well, when I heard about this movie, I had like a soft green light to it. I'm like, because I had just watched the mini-series Mrs. America on FX over the summer, and that was about the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, and it's like Gloria Steinem's was a character in that. So like this film and that mini-series share a lot of the same characters, and like I actually got to watch this, and my review is up on Sif Pop for it right now. I liked it. It was definitely ambitious and tried something different when it comes to biopics. So like I compared it to, I watched I Am Woman, which was the Helen Reddy biopic that came out a couple weeks ago. Literally, like I just sat there like, well, this is gonna happen. This is gonna happen. I
saw your review of that. Yeah.
And I'm just like, I appreciated this at least did something different. So I guess the next film, so that gets we got Matt back. But next film we're going to be talking about is The Boys in the Band, which got released on Netflix this weekend. And don't make the same mistake I did, because I don't really watch trailers anymore, thinking that this was actually about a band.
Right, that's what I thought.
So this is actually a play about a group of gay men having a party, and one of their former roommates shows up, and things get awkward and weird. And this is starring Jim Parsons, it's starring Matt Bomer, it's starring Zachary Quinto. it actually has a lot of gay actors in it portraying these characters, and they all performed the 2018 Broadway version of this. So it's based off of a play. It's been made into a film once before. This is from Ryan Murphy, who basically is doing everything on Netflix now, like Ratched, American Horror Stories, American Crime Stories, Pose, all those different shows. So all that being said, Alex, are you going to greenlight The Boys in the Band?
I'm gonna play neutral on this one, man. I can't really, because once I read what it was really about, I thought it was about a band, which is right up my alley.
Mhm.
But once I read what it was about, I was like, someone's gonna have to sit down and watch this one with me. So, I'm not gonna send it. Not gonna send it back. But I'm not gonna give it a green light either. I don't know if I can do that or not.
This is our show. We can do whatever the hell we want. So, all right, Matt. I don't know if you heard much about what I was talking about in terms of The Boys in the Band, but have you heard about
I saw the movie. I thought it was fantastic. I have no idea why my Wi-Fi keeps going in and out, so that's super weird. But I did see it. Greenlight the hell out of it. Like, greenlight it all the way.
I enjoyed it quite a bit. I watched it last night with Jess, and I just wrote a review for Sif Pop, and like it definitely feels like a play, and it definitely feels like something Ryan Murphy did. But in the end, like I had a lot of fun with it. So, and it was funny, and it got really dramatic and emotional too. So, Alex, I would suggest giving it a shot.
Cool.
Now we got a new Netflix documentary called Dick Johnson is Dead. And this is Kirsten Johnston is a filmmaker, and her dad was developing dementia. So, and he was a psychologist, and they decided to take a less traditional way of dealing with his dementia by making a film about his eventual death and coming up with crazy over-the-top ways of him dying and putting them to film. And it's so basically it's kind of a way for this filmmaker to make this connection with her father and also try to cope with the inevitability in an interesting and unique way. So Alex, based off of my description, did I just sell you on Dick Johnson is Dead?
I would green light that totally. Yeah, no, that sounds really interesting. It just sounds like somebody dealing with the loss of some or eventual loss, but with their creativity. So that I think that's sounds like something I would do.
How about you, Matt? Are you going to green light Dick Johnson is Dead?
Yes. Yeah. Well, that sounds interesting. I don't know. I might want to watch a trailer. I like trailers, so I don't know. So I would have to see if it would be something that I would watch, but it wouldn't be something that I wouldn't give it like a try. Does that make sense? I feel like we need to have like a middle. Do we talk about Purgatory last week?
Well, Alex used one already, so he's going to be like, it's like we kind of like put the film, like the reel, kind of like on the side of the desk, and we'll come back and think about it later.
Boom.
So that's what Matt's doing right now.
Yes, I actually that in there.
Just watched it like a couple hours before I hopped on here, and I thought it was pretty moving, and it was an interesting documentary, so I enjoyed it. And
a lot of the films about like dementia, typically like when I'm watching them with a friend or one of my mom, they're like, "Oh, I don't want to go there. I don't want to watch that. It sounds depressing." But this sounds like a kind of a creative way to handle it, because you have to be creative when someone's going through that.
Yeah, my grandmother did, and I lived with her for 19 years of my life, and the last 7 years of it dealt with a lot of stuff like that. So like I really appreciated this film, and it's on Netflix right now. It's a Netflix original. So all of those are all Netflix originals, and so, or at least streaming originals. Glorias was on Amazon. This next one's also on Netflix, Vampires versus the Bronx. So it's a bunch of kids from the Bronx trying to fight off vampires who are buying up all the real estate in the Bronx. So there's the description. would you greenlight this movie about a bunch of think like a bunch of kids from the Bronx, Stranger Things, and instead of like like all these like strange creatures and stuff, and replace them with vampires?
That could be really, it could be really fun, but it could also go horribly wrong based on your facial expression and Chris Stuckman's facial expression in his video. I didn't watch his review, but he looks like he thoroughly enjoyed it. So I'll greenlight it only because you two seem like you're really excited about it. But it could be, that could go south really quickly.
How about you, Matt?
Yeah, why not? I want to see something fun. I mean, so like when I watched Boys in the Band, I still don't even know why it's called that, but I watched Boys in the Band once, and I was like, damn, that's good, and I can't go to sleep. So I watched it again, and then like Shane is right. Shane isn't underselling like that movie. Like it's definitely has like a lot of like awesome one-liners and it's funny. But also like really emotionally draining. So like, so it was like 2 hours before my alarm clock. Like for work about to come on. I was like, okay, so what do I do now? And then I was like, well, maybe I'll like just check out a bunch of trailers, see like what's coming out on Netflix. I'm really excited for that. I probably should have just like, watched, this vampire movie instead of going back to sleep and then, oversleeping my alarm. But
I watched it this morning and it's a lot of fun. I
Give it
definitely thumbs up. It's like B- kind of thing, because like it's fun. Like there's no characterization to these vampires. They're vampires. They're not really interesting, but watching a bunch of kids from the Bronx trying in modern times, so like they try to take videos of it on their phones and put it on social media, but of course reflections. So everyone's like, these dumb kids, they're looking at nothing. And like they're a fun group of kids. They wind up watching Blade to try to figure out how to fight vampires. And it's a fun movie. And it really, I think it's like vampires, the Bronx. The Bronx is like a character in itself in this, because you could tell like these kids are very much like kids from the Bronx and fighting for that. And it kind of has a little bit of tinge of like gentrification kind of ideas to it.
Yeah.
And the only white people in the movie are the vampires. So it's like, it might be a little on the nose, but they have fun with it. So
Sure.
Now, here's some very interesting independent films getting limited releases this weekend. So Bleecker Street has Save Yourselves, and this is a hipster relationship comedy about two people from Brooklyn who their relationship's a little shaky, so they go out to the upstate New York kind of place, out into a cabin. Their phones are turned off. They're isolated. They're trying to reconnect. And things start to slowly go weird. Like, where did this furry-looking ottoman come from? Where did all of their alcohol go? And slowly this movie starts turning into an alien invasion movie. And so...
I wasn't expecting that.
So, you got half relationship comedy, half alien invasion movie. Are you going to greenlight this, Alex?
Man, what's going on in the world, man? What's happening? Like, it's I don't know. Maybe it's that genre mixing, genre blending. Is that coming from the Koreans? Are the Korean filmmakers having such an influence on the world, where it's a lot of genre blending going on? No, you know what? I'm going to send this one. I'm sending this one back because I am not feeling that. I'm not. I'm going to send this one back.
Alex is just like, don't try to just throw two movies together. Just make one good movie. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, yeah, that log line didn't sell me. I'll be honest with you. That didn't sell me. I
Yeah,
feel
I
like
need.
I feel like it could either be like really like interesting, but interesting doesn't always mean good. You know what I mean? Like I've seen a lot of bad, interesting movies, or like a movie with like a really interesting premise or a good trailer, and I'm watching it, and it's like I only like 30% of this. What do you mean that there's 20 minutes more? I hate that feeling. Yeah, send it back, throw it back into the ocean, or
Damn, because
the
I got
hell.
a screener of this a couple weeks ago. So I got to see this already like a few weeks ago, and I really, really love this movie a lot.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, if you just think about the premise, it's like, okay. But like it is legitimately funny, and they do a really nice job of the slow build up of tension to when that kind of flips. And one of my favorite things about alien movies is what's the alien going to be? What are the aliens going to be like?
Right. Right.
And they definitely lean into the fact that this is a comedy and
Okay.
the design of the aliens and the reveal is so well done. And like Bleecker Street, like I've been screening quite a few of their films lately, and like they just make quality films, honestly. Like I don't think I've seen many Bleecker Street films that are just bad. They at least have like they're well made, and like this is a fun movie. I enjoyed it. So if you get a chance to see it, I like
What's the title one more time?
Save Yourselves.
Save Yourselves.
Now
Okay.
this next one, we're gonna get weird now. So Brandon Cronenberg, son of David Cronenberg, has a new science fiction film, Possessor, that comes out. And it's about an organization who possess people's bodies to use them to assassinate people. So think
Facebook?
about
No, I said Facebook. I'm just kidding.
so so you never find out really about who's doing this. So think this high concept idea, the moral dilemmas, and throw in this was made by a Cronenberg. And like
Wow.
he definitely doesn't fall far from the tree. Let's just put it that way. So Alex, Greenlight or send back to development hell?
Wow. These are really, really interesting plots. You know, the types of plots that, yeah, it has to be executed in such a way for it to really work. Um, you know, I'll give it a soft green light only because it's intriguing. And yes, what he's coming from is, whoa, I still need to watch a lot of David Cronenberg stuff. I saw Scanners. I don't think I saw anything else from him.
Have you seen The Fly?
No, I never saw The Fly. No.
Be afraid.
Goldblum. How about you, Matt? Are you going to greenlight Possessor?
Uh, the way that you said it, you sold me 70%. I think that's another one I gotta watch the trailer. I don't know. Ever since what was that movie? I'm thinking of ending things. I think I think name recognition is kind of like sometimes every once in a while kind of like losing its appeal. You know what I mean? Where I got like really excited for like somebody, and then it's like, oh, well, okay, well, that was 2 hours. You know what I mean? So I don't know, but I'll see. Maybe you should watch it first, and
Oh, I did
then.
already.
Oh, okay, LOL. Okay,
I
so
got a
then
screener for this.
give
My
give
review
it a
comes
grade.
out next week. But like,
I'll
this is a crazy movie. Like,
Oh shit.
no, turn it back up. Turn it back up, Matt. I liked this movie, and I definitely want to see more stuff that he does because like just like it's hard to describe the way they even portray the possession of someone is so strange and makes you feel like you're having an out-of-body experience. It's very ambitious and visual and just unnerving, because this movie could be terrifying at times too. And it's got some body horror. It's extremely violent too. Like the opening part of this movie, trying to set things up, just like hits you like a sledgehammer. So this is a special kind of film that I think if you're a cinephile, you have to at least watch it and see how you connect to it.
Do you like it because it was shocking or because you like the story? I feel like movies like that, like sometimes they can kind of like lean towards one thing or the other. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but like, why did you like it? Or did it have both of those things, a good story and like visuals, like were there too?
It delivered visuals, it delivered atmosphere, it delivered on the atmosphere of the film. There was real tension in it. The story honestly can feel a little muddled at times, but
too many things going on.
Like, especially like the last act of this movie is definitely up to interpretation at times, whether what's going on. But some of the choices in the story turn it back to being more character driven instead of just like a concept, like a sci-fi concept. So like they definitely deal with the moral concerns too of it. So it's definitely something where it's like, I recommend it. As for cinephiles, you have to watch it to experience it. But I feel like, because like, I never once said I'm thinking of ending things is going to be a film for everyone.
Mm.
And like Charlie Kaufman's that kind of director. You really have to be vibing with him. And I feel like Cronenberg's the same way. And Brandon Cronenberg definitely learned a lot from his father. So let's just put it that way. So Matt, you get to go first on this gem. We got Hubie Halloween, Adam Sandler's new Halloween film on Netflix. Do I need to say more?
No, unless you want me to like run and get a couple of antacids. No, dude, like I don't want to watch that movie. It looks bad.
The only thing I'm curious about is because Adam Sandler said he was going to make the worst film he's ever made if he didn't get nominated for an Oscar. Is this?
No, I feel like it was funny when he put that out, that headline out.
But want to actually watch that?
Yeah, like I feel like he should have, like, instead of be angry or fake angry, why don't you? Or maybe he is and we just don't know about it. Maybe you should like make a bunch of phone calls to like a bunch of other famous like screenwriters and directors and say, hey, like, you know, I want to make those types of movies now. Because like I feel like even if you did the paycheck movie, you did the movies, you've done like the serious movies. You haven't done the serious movies in a long time. Like, why don't you do something else? Aren't you bored?
Well, here's the thing, Matt.
Like, aren't you bored of that?
It's a giant contract with Netflix that pays him a ridiculous amount of money to go on vacation, hang out with his friends, and make movies.
And kill cinema. I mean, this isn't going to kill cinema.
Adam Sandler's movies don't kill cinema. He knows exactly what he's doing. And anybody who see those movies should know exactly what they're getting into. So, Alex, we were talking about Hubie Halloween, Adam Sandler's new Halloween Netflix movie.
Move on. Next topic.
So, I am definitely giving that one to Development Hell too, because I don't get excited for any Adam Sandler comedies anymore. So, at least not since the early 2000s. So, no. I'm going to watch it on Wednesday. We're going to see how that goes.
I'll wait 9 years when he does another good film.
Fair. Now, we got another mainstream comedy with great acting pedigree in it, The War with Grandpa. Robert De Niro moves in with his family, and has to share a bedroom with his grandson, and they go to war over it. And Robert De Niro's best friend is Christopher Walken. He's in love with Jane Seymour, so it's old. Well, I think Alan Arkin might have been in it too. I have to double check that one. I have to fact check that one. And they're just having a ball. And for some reason, Uma Thurman's in this as the kid's mom. Married to Rob Riggle. So might have been a loaded presentation to that one, but based off of Alex's face, which is kind of a De Niro face, are you gonna
a little bit.
Development hell too?
A little bit of hell. A little bit of the development hell. Yes, definitely.
How about you, Matt?
Send it back.
I'm not excited about this either.
I get worried about
a screener to it, but
I love Uma Thurman's performance and the stuff that she's done with Tarantino, but she just flounders outside of the stuff that she's done with him. And so once I heard Walken and De Niro, and it's like they got it. There was a great actors in their time, and De Niro can still do great stuff. But he's also done some stuff that's just like, why are you doing this, man? Obviously, it's money, friends, and other, people he's in with, and, so Hollywood
wants to hang out with Walken. And, I feel like besides The Jungle Book and Seven Psychopaths, I really haven't been excited about anything Christopher Walken has done in 15 years.
A long time.
So, because I know he was in Hairspray, and he was fun in that too. But that's 3 movies I can name in the 2000s.
Right. He was very good. He was very good in Catch Me If You Can as Leo's father.
See, that's only 20 years ago. I forgot.
A long time ago. Yeah.
So he was. I did enjoy him a lot in that. But yeah. I'm going to cut to the chase and just give you one last one. So this gets limited release, I believe, this weekend, but coming out on digital next week. It's Spontaneous. And Catherine Langford I think she's famous from 13 Reasons Why, but also was supposed to be in Avengers Endgame, but is in a deleted scene. And Charlie Plummer are 2 young teenagers falling in love during a crazy time at their high school when, for some reason, all the seniors in this high school start spontaneously exploding.
With promise or actually exploding?
Literally.
Okay,
this film opens up with class going on and a girl exploding, blood shooting everywhere, and that's the tone of the film. It's funny. It's a teenage romance and dealing with the existential dread of what would I do if I die tomorrow. So
specifically blow up. Specifically, what would I do if I just
blew up tomorrow? Yep. So, Alex, based off of that description,
is that the girl who eats the blueberries in Willy Wonka's factory? Is that her fear? Is that her PTSD for the rest of her life?
That she's gonna blow up.
She's gonna blow up. It's gonna be blueberries for breakfast every day. No. I'm not going to send it back only because I want to see that opening scene.
How about you, Matt?
Wait, is there anything else about the movie? I feel like I still don't have a gist of it. Can you give me any more, or that's just it? They're just afraid. They're just afraid. They're just afraid of growing up.
Well, the film is about at the heart of it. It's these 2 young people connecting during this traumatic time in this town. And you're with them as they're connecting and growing a relationship while that shadow of dread is kind of hanging over everybody at the school, that who's going to be next and why is it happening?
By the way, when they blow up, like they like, it's not like Willy Wonka. It's not like they don't just turn into like confetti. Like they blow up like bloody.
So literally, it must be at a molecular level because everything that just well, not molecular, like everything, their organs, their skin just turns into blood and just everywhere.
Whoa.
All that's left is buckets of blood and clothes.
Okay.
I think that's what happens when people don't wear face masks, right?
Yes.
Gotcha.
So watching this movie in like
too political,
what's going on right now had a whole other level of just like, it adds a different layer to it. Just put it that way.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I feel like even if like the visual of people exploding, like I don't know if you guys watched the show The Boys, but there's a lot of people that like explode on that show. But like
also an explosive beginning to that show of the first season.
True, like it was pretty wild actually. But I feel like this movie, I get vibes. Actually, a couple of these movies, I get vibes of kind of like, like when you're on demand and you go to the free movie section, it's like, oh, like what's going on? Let's see what happens. And it's only maybe like 3 movies you've heard of and like 20 movies you've either never heard of or you know are garbage. So you're like, oh, okay, well, I want to watch one of the ones that like I've never heard of. Let me just pick one, and then it's like, okay, gotcha.
Well, if you're going on demand and you see this, I hope you pick this one because I loved it. I watched this Thursday night and I got a early screener of it. Like, this is one of the funniest movies I've watched all year.
Would you watch it? Oh, so you would watch it again?
I would own this movie.
What's it called again?
Spontaneous.
Where did you watch it on? Or who made it?
I got this from Paramount, I think it was. I got invited to their screener room to watch it. It comes out on VOD, if I'm not mistaken, on the 6th. So, like, I laughed. Catherine Langford is an extremely talented young actress, and she has amazing comedic timing. And honestly, this love story was extremely endearing. And I'm like, I actually care about them. They actually sound like teenagers. And it's funny. And honestly, not many films this year have put me on the edge of my seat like this film did. Because how they construct it and shoot it, that building tension of when something gonna happen, because when stuff happens, it's shocking. Like, it's bam. And it's darkly funny at times too, because they do play some of it. There's one particular montage in this film that is really darkly funny. But honestly, I think this one's definitely worth checking out. So there's a lot of.
When you find out the reason why that they're exploding, is it a good reason or does it make you roll your eyes?
I don't want to say because I don't want to spoil it. Because I'm not about spoiling movies on a live podcast before they're released, Matt.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you the third degree when the podcast is over.
When we stop recording, if you really, really want to know, and after Alex hops off, if he doesn't want to know right now, I will tell you.
I think it's because of gay marriage, right?
Yes, there we go. There we go. There we go.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, they do bring up the potential religious turns of people and how people might try to explain the situation. Because there are like at the funerals of some of these kids, like Westboro Baptist Church-esque protests going on kind of stuff. So it also has some things to say about
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a clever movie and has something to say too. So I appreciated that. So there's a lot of stuff coming out either this weekend or next weekend. So I don't think as much the following weekend since everything's getting pushed back. because like Bond just got pushed back, I think today or yesterday got pushed back to May 2021, which then Furious 9 got pushed back 2 months because Bond got pushed back. So basically there's not a whole lot of movies except for The Croods and Soul left in the next 2 months. So just putting that out there. Now, I guess time to shift gears into our topic today, because who doesn't love a monologue? And not going to lie, I was rewatching The Incredibles this morning. And you're going to catch us monologuing. So one of my favorite lines in The Incredibles is when Syndrome's just like, oh, look at you. You caught me monologuing. Because who doesn't love a villain monologue? So how we're going to go, so Alex, then Matt, then myself, we're going to share maybe a couple of monologues, like honorable mentions of ones that we really enjoy, and then talking about one particular, or if we have two monologues that we really, really love and why, and we'll talk about them. So Alex, you're up.
Sure. Yeah. But first of all, thanks, man. I mean, I think this is a great topic. When you reminded me of it, I was like, oh man, that's perfect. And I thought of a monologue from a movie that I definitely don't think is a great movie, but I think it's a good movie that everybody should see. You know, and you don't have to grow up in New Jersey or New York, you know, to appreciate it. But I certainly think it helps a little bit if you spent a little bit of time in New York City. And the movie is 25th Hour, and the actor is Edward Norton. And it's basically a monologue. It's basically a whole "fuck you" speech where he's basically disowning everything in New York City. But the thing that's, you know, kind of sad about it is he's also disowning everything that he loves. And one of the reasons for that is that he's on the cusp of going to jail for a pretty long time. I don't think it's like for his entire life, but it's probably like at least 10 years. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've seen the whole film, but it's at least like 10 years that this guy is about to go to prison. And so he's basically saying, fuck, he goes into the bathroom and he sees it actually, someone wrote "fuck you" on one of the bottom corners of the mirror. And so he spends about, you know, 5 to 6 minutes saying fuck all these different things in New York City. And so I think Spike Lee, who directed the movie, does a really wonderful job of blending fiction and reality. Because all these things that he's saying, fuck this, fuck that, fuck the Wall Street brokers, Gordon Gekko wannabes, fuck the Bensonhurst Italians, you know, fuck, you know, the Puerto Ricans with their Puerto Rican Day parades and all this stuff, you know, it's all of this stuff that's, it's fiction, but it's real at the same time. And then this movie came out, I think, a year after 9/11, or 6 months to a year after 9/11. So toward the end of the monologue, he says, you know, fuck Osama bin Laden. And you know, there's a lot of you know, insensitive, you know, like religious insensitivity in it. You know, there's a lot, but it's what's funny about it is he doesn't leave anybody out. He that insensitivity kind of goes, he just throws it at everybody. And toward the end, he starts talking about his own family, the woman that he loves, the friends that he's kind of grown up with. And he's saying, fuck them too. And then he looks at himself in the mirror, and finally he says, no, you know, fuck you. You know, you had it, and then you threw it all away. You know, you stupid fuck, you know. And so it's it's funny. You kind of want to laugh at it. But then you also realize how sad it is, because he's basically sounding off against everything that he knows and everything that he is. And, you know, I guess I've had those days. So I think I've felt that way. And, it's very effective. The editing is part of what makes it so good, flooding your brain with these images of these people in New York City. And then also the music is really good. It's the same composer that Spike Lee has used for a number of his movies. I think his name is, I wrote it down somewhere. Terence Blanchard is the name of the composer. The music is really, really important. And the other thing that was very effective about this monologue was that he's staring at himself in the mirror, and you could see they must have edited it so that the Edward Norton performance coming from the mirror, he's talking to a version of himself that's not talking and not moving. You could tell because the version of him that's standing outside the mirror is not moving. He's just kind of, in a subtle way, just looking at himself, not moving, not doing anything, whereas the version of himself in the mirror is far more animated. So it's almost like he's, sort of talking down to himself until at the end it's him saying back to himself in the mirror, "No, fuck you. I mean, you had it all and you threw it all away." So it's a monologue that kind of when you reminded me about this topic and I started sitting down thinking of other monologues, I went, "Oh, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one," because it just stuck with me I hadn't seen it in years, and it just stuck with me all these years later. So yeah.
I remember, I think I saw that film in film club in college for the first time. And honestly, it was one of the first Spike Lee films that I've ever seen. Because, like, at that point, I hadn't really seen any Spike Lee films. And I remember watching that and Inside Man, both in film club. And I remember thinking, like, because Edward Norton's a fantastic actor, and he sells the hell out of that scene. And it's so interesting because it is very much, this guy is spending his last night before going to jail and just lashing out on this place that he's born in, grew up in, raised in, molded by, and just lashing out at it, trying to blame it for what happens to him. And then that powerful moment at the end where he's just like, "Nope, it's all you. You're the one who messed this up." And I've seen that pop up on lists of monologues before and videos of top monologues because it is a really biting and intense scene. And I really, really like that film a lot, honestly. And it's very much that journey with him and his friends that night. And that's a big way to really set the tone of like how he sees himself at that point. What do you think, Matt?
I think it's awesome. I think it's an awesome choice for a monologue. I think it's interesting when you think about Spike Lee's movies because if you like pull up his Wikipedia page and you see like all the movies that he's done, right? And then like there's the ones that like maybe like no one has really like ever seen because he does have like a few of those. Maybe like even some of those even be like recent, not just like super early in his career. But there's also ones that like kind of like I don't know. The ones that are nominated for crap, like Do the Right Thing. There's like a lot of movies. He's like a really prolific kind of guy, like writer, director wise, and just director. That's a really awesome movie that he like directed the hell out of, and he got. I don't know if Edward Norton is an awesome actor. Obviously, I feel like that was one of the first movies that I saw of his, and I was like, wow, this guy is like I have to stop this. Like after I'm done with this movie, I have to like look up all the rest of his stuff. I don't know if you guys ever had a movie like that. You kind of have to like you're so excited about the thing you just saw that you have to go and research it just to see like how can I get more of what I just saw. Like I remember watching that. I think it was like watching like in my dorm or something like that. I don't know, but I like that movie. And Spike Lee, like I'm happy that he kind of came back with Black Klansman, and a lot of people are kind of like back on like, oh, like crap, like this guy makes movies. Like this guy's like a really awesome guy. He's not just making like this like these super small, weird, tiny little things. And he's not like, and even if he's maybe always going to be on some level polarizing, like that's okay because like he has something to say, and it's like it's important and it's like current and relevant. And I think that maybe some of the stuff that like if anyone let's watch this podcast, goes and looks back on that monologue. I wonder, even if they're maybe from New York or not, I'm curious how would they connect with something that came out in, what year did that come out? You said 2001?
I think it was. I thought it was 2002, but
2002?
could have
Okay,
been
yeah.
2001.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm curious, like, what people would say about that. I wonder if people still feel that way, or if people can just connect with the idea of like pointing the finger at everything and then kind of angrily having to point it at yourself, or not. I don't know. The dope is hell pick, dude. I like that
Yeah,
pick a lot.
yeah. I think Spike Lee. I underrate him. I forget how good some of his films are. My brother and I were watching He Got Game. Yeah, exactly. He's kind of had that type of career. Because I've seen some films that just I didn't connect with. We were watching He Got Game, and I was like, "Oh, okay, we'll watch a few minutes of this," and then we couldn't put it down. Like we had to finish it. I had to finish it. There's just so many. He makes these kind of jarring music choices, but then you kind of it works on you, and it kind of starts to work. And he does that in this film too. But yes, he definitely has had one of those types of careers. Not too different from like a Brian De Palma, who's some. I more recently kind of dug into some of his filmography, where some of the films he's made, where it's like, whoa, this guy is he's got his own creative control. He's in his own world. He's doing his things. They're really interesting movies, but this is not going to sell. Like this is not going to, and then he'll come out with Scarface or something else, and that makes a lot of money, and then he goes back to doing the shit that he wants to do, or making $500,000 budget movies outside his house or something, so I think Spike Lee has had more that type of roller coaster sort of career, but he definitely got a very unique voice. And Edward Norton at that time, I mean, late 90s, early 2000s, Edward Norton was the man. He was doing a lot of really good stuff. So many good films. He was becoming, I thought, he was on track to become like the De Niro of his generation.
I think his attitude gets in the way with that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's what I've heard.
Yeah. Well, because the thing is, it's like, I did fact check. It came out in 2002, so it was pretty close to after when 9/11 happened. They were probably filming it around then. And like with Edward Norton, it's funny because the first movie I remember watching Edward Norton in is The Italian Job. So like obviously that wasn't the movie where I'm just like, I need to look up more of what this guy does.
Sure.
No, there's Mark Wahlberg in it and Jason Statham. But like Edward Norton's amazing actor. And American History X, Fight Club, this were all within a close chunk of time. And like I think that what was the last time he really got awards recognition was probably Birdman for supporting actor, which basically playing a fictionalized version of himself, and which a lot of the people in that movie were probably playing fictionalized versions of themselves.
Right.
Because, Michael Keaton playing Birdman, Batman.
Yeah.
So, like, and Spike Lee, it was interesting that he brought Brian De Palma because the first comparison I thought of was the Coen brothers. Now, the Coen brothers have a lot more universal acclaim, but every movie you watch of theirs is very much a Coen brothers movie. But you can tell there's a different level of artistic merit to some of their films. Because, like, you can tell Spike Lee's making a Black Klansman or a Do the Right Thing. You could also tell when he's making an Inside Man. I don't think anybody's going to, like, go and watch Inside Man and think this is going to be one of the greatest films of all time.
Right.
Because it's very much a genre film. He does his thing with it, and I really love that film. The Coen brothers do the same thing. Nobody's going to go watch Intolerable Cruelty and think this is going to be one of the greatest films of all time. But, it's a funny Coen brothers movie. But then you also have No Country and Fargo and stuff like that, and you know that they're bringing their A game onto something. So, and like it took me a while to really get into Spike Lee's films. Probably just the past couple of years where I really watched a whole lot of them. And honestly, it was probably watching Black Klansman in theaters and being like, I'm gonna give it a shot. Because honestly, the first two films that I've seen of his were this, the 25th Hour, and Inside Man, because I watched them in film club in college. So, which was an interesting place to start for Spike Lee, because they're definitely not the two films that you would think of. Name a Spike Lee film. Neither of them are really going to be it.
True, and that's why I think 25th Hour is a little underwatched, a little underrated, and it's definitely stylized. You know, in comparison, I felt like Inside Man, he showed his versatility on that, because it didn't have that Spike Lee feel necessarily, but I really liked how understated Inside Man was. Actually, it was very understated, and that worked. You know, surprisingly, I was really surprised. I didn't think it was going to work for me, and it really did. But no, he got game. 25th Hour. I never saw all Do the Right Thing, but I've seen some of the stuff that he did with Denzel Washington in the late 80s, early 90s, and it's definitely more stylized. The camera movement, the editing, the angles from below, you know, seeing characters float as opposed to walk, like this, you know, he definitely does a lot of that. It's different.
The Five Bloods had all of it. Like Spike Lee threw all of his Spike Lee isms into that movie, and it's a hell of a movie.
Oh man,
also to watch on Netflix.
Oh, cool.
But Matt, what is your monologue?
My monologue. Okay, so I really wanted to go in and I wanted to say American Psycho because I really like that movie.
I knew you were going to say that. Oh man.
But I had to. So I ended up watching Pulp Fiction again with my grandpa out of nowhere. It was the first time we ever watched it, and it was the he was like clicking through stuff, and then he got to the scene with the watch. And he was like, "What is this movie?" And like I'm thinking, and I'm like, "Well, okay, so
only the second weirdest scene to watch on."
Because it's like, well, okay, so this is probably gonna be super weird and random and awkward if I watch this movie, but I'm an adult, so he can't put his hand over my eyes. Let's see what happens. And then he ended up liking it, except for one scene, and he's like, "What the hell are we watching?" And I was like, and I made sure to take the remote off the dining room table so he couldn't change the channel. And he stuck with it, and it was good. But but no, the monologue that I'll choose. So sorry for American Psycho. I'll say Pulp Fiction. I got to go with Samuel L. Jackson at the very end when he's discussing with the character, with I think Tim Roth's character, about the origin of why he says the Bible verse. And he's sitting in the diner and he has like the gun in his hand and he's pointing it at the guy and he's like, and he does the whole thing again. And you would think I think that's like the third time you might have heard it in the movie, I don't know, something. And it's like, but it's really riveting how he says it. And it's really interesting how he takes this whole thing about revenge and power and what happens when people go against you, and especially if you consider yourself either having power of or on the side of God, and then like how you're gonna basically mow somebody down. And then he says a moment of clarity, and he takes how he feels about wanting to get out of the business of being a hitman or whatever the hell he wants to call himself, and he sort of flips it on its head, sort of, and he like deconstructs it in like two different ways. And the second way that he does it is like super not realistic, super truthful, where it's like maybe I'm part of the problem. Like maybe I am as bad as I always known myself to be, but I'm really trying hard to get out of it. I'm super trying really, really hard. And this one moment is like the first good deed that I'm gonna do to get back towards, like, I don't know, or not, maybe not get back, but go towards something different. And I just think that it's so awesome and interesting, and like, I don't know how many people I've shown that movie, that scene to. I think like my roommate in college, that was like one of the first ever conversations we had about movies. He was like, "Oh, it's like, what do you watch?" And I was like, and I forget what he showed me. And I was like, "You should just watch this thing. We're on YouTube." And I put it up. And he was like, "Wow, that's Samuel Jackson." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, the snakes on the plane guy, like that guy." Like, I don't know, that monologue. He is just like, and it's not a lot of screaming either. That's another cool thing too. Like, it's not really very angry. It's like a remorseful kind of thing. It's also kind of like a heady kind of thing. And I can only imagine somebody that like can really write something like that. Like, I guess if you were to write that, that means you really have to know your character. And then if you have to act that, like, you really have to understand like how to get across like emotion. And like, I have no idea why that man didn't get like the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, but I
Yeah.
forget. I think Ed Wood got it, some old guy, and I saw
Martin
Ed Wood, and
Landau.
I was, yeah, and that movie was boring as hell. Nah, it wasn't boring, but it wasn't as good as Pulp Fiction. But yeah, like
Martin Landau gave a very, very strong performance in Ed Wood. But
no, I'm just kidding.
like,
I'm just kidding.
I was fine. I won't support your point, Matt.
No.
So, first off, for a second, I thought you were going to talk about your dad. He had this watch up his ass.
I think
Like, I
if
thought
my
you were
grandpa
talking
was
about
sitting
that
here, he liked
monologue.
that scene. He would say that.
That was your honorable mention. Yeah.
So, obviously, Pulp Fiction's in 3 main parts. And that last speech from Jules is one of the main reasons why the 3rd part's my favorite part. Because the thing is, it's like, when he does his whole thing at the beginning, it's fun, it's badass. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, did I break your concentration? And just like all of the things he says in that room is great. But there is something, there's a level of intensity and reflectiveness on how he says it at the end, because he's saying it to really think about, what am I really saying and why am I saying this? And when he comes to that realization, maybe I'm the tyranny in that whole, because he's like, I really want to be the shepherd, but like,
You're the weak. I love it.
like, I agree, Matt. I don't know how Samuel L. Jackson didn't get an Oscar that year, and he's still bitter about it too. So he still doesn't know either.
Samuel L. Jackson's a very proud man, as he should be. I don't know if you guys know, because I've watched the documentaries on Pulp Fiction and stuff, but what they said, what Lawrence Bender and Tarantino said, was that that's basically how he got the role, because they came up to him and said, we didn't know how this movie was going to end until you did the monologue. Now we kind of know how this movie's supposed to end. And that's a very powerful thing for an actor to be able to bring to the table. I also don't know if you know, there was a scene written in the script where Jules actually sees himself doing what he would have done before the Divine Intervention, where he actually shoots Tim Roth and Amanda Plummer, and they shoot them and they leave. And Sam Jackson really wanted to shoot it, and Tarantino said, no, I don't want to shoot it, because if I shoot it, I'm going to want to keep it. And Sam Jackson still wishes that they shot it. And I'm glad they didn't, because of what you guys have kind of just illustrated. It's like the monologue itself has so much richness to it. I think a lot of people take away something different, from that monologue, and it really does add so much to the world and the feel and the tone of that film, And I think it's a great point that you made, Matt, about basically this is not a good person. We love him, the character, but he's not a good person. He does something very bad for a living, and this is the first time that we're really seeing him say, do something good for somebody else. It's like, I and of course the dialogue is just musical. I'm giving you that so I don't have to kill your ass.
You'd be dead as fried chicken. I love that.
Yeah, it's just so much.
There's so many things. There's so many like little speeches or whatever you could talk about any Tarantino movie, because he knows how to write dialogue really, really well. So,
Glorious Bastards. When you meet Brad Pitt, was that the first time? I think so.
Yeah,
this is awesome. A boom. I want 100 Nazi scalps. And just everything. Now, I am a huge fan of scene chewing. I enjoy watching actors just go for it. I have so much fun with it. I was so tempted to talk about multiple Al Pacino monologues here, because whether it's Scent of a Woman screaming, "I'm going to burn this place down with a flamethrower," or from Devil's Advocate being like, "I'm a fan of man and God is a sadist." But there's other things that I feel like are more important and more meaningful monologues and more effective monologues than Al Pacino just yelling, but a lot of fun. So my really close to what I was going to pick specifically, so I'm not going to talk about this a whole lot, but the film Patton, which most people would expect this is a big scale war movie, it's a character study. It is a 3-hour character study about one of the most controversial men in the history of our military. And I grew up, my grandfather fought for Patton and loved Patton. And I remember watching this with him. And you need something to set up this larger than life character for a 3-hour epic about one man. And what is better than him dressed to the nines in all of his military garb in front of a giant American flag, talking to his troops, telling them, "No son of a bitch won a war by dying for his country. Won that war by making the other son of a bitch die for his." And everything that he says in that speech to his troops, and honestly, they probably shot it. There's probably nobody else there. It's just George C. Scott on that stage in front of that giant flag, and you learn everything you need to know about that man in that speech. And then it just goes. The next 3 hours is just you being in awe of this larger-than-life character who they reinforced through the themes and dialogue that this was a man at a time. He wasn't meant to be fighting in a political war in the 20th century. He was supposed to be on the battlefield in ancient Rome, which he believed he was. He believed in reincarnation. And when he arrived in Italy, he's like, "I fought here." And that opening speech is so great. But what I want to talk about, and from one of the greatest actors of all time, from one of the most impressive performances in the history of cinema, There Will Be Blood, and I Drank Your Milkshake. Now, I think it's funny because if you haven't seen the film, most people are like, what the hell is he talking about? But
Yeah.
in general, the actual speech is a pretty well done metaphor to help you understand drilling, which realistically, how many people going into There Will Be Blood are experts on drilling? But it's a really great visual. And because this film, Daniel Plainview has just dropped so deep into this depth, the depths of there's no humanity left here. If there ever was, it's definitely gone now. And he is the personification of greed and business in that moment, coming face to face with his antagonist, which he's also the antagonist of the story too, of religion. And this priest, played by Paul Dano, coming begging for Daniel Plainview to buy his land for the oil. And that reveal, and he's just like, drainage, drainage. And him explaining that, I'm not going to buy your land. You don't have any oil left. And the whole idea that he drilled it all out from under him. He bought every piece of land around that farm and stole his oil. And what are they going to do about it? Nobody's going to be taking Daniel Plainview down for that. And then the whole entire metaphor. It's like, you have a milkshake, I have a milkshake. But I have a straw. And my straw reaches across the room. And I begin to drink it. I drank your milkshake. I drank it up. And just the way that he just commits to what realistically is pretty silly dialogue, written very well to illustrate exactly what he was talking about, is terrifying. The look on that man's face, and you can tell Eli Sunday is not having a good time at that moment. He has been emasculated. He has been just sitting there looking afraid for his life. And like some of the stuff he says to him, it's like, you're the afterbirth, Eli. They should have put you in a jar on the mantelpiece. And just like some of the sadistic things he says in that, it's one of the most committed, just tearing down of a human being. And then it all blows up when he grabs him, throws him onto that bowling alley, and chases him down and beats him to death. And honestly, one of my favorite final lines of any film is when that hapless butler walks down the steps. It's like, Mr. Plainview? And he's just sitting there, covered in blood, huffing and puffing, and you're like, I'm finished. And then it just cuts to black, and then this orchestra of music and strings just playing, and just like, what the hell did I just watch? And it's just such a perfect exclamation point to a really impressive cinematic experience. And one of the most intense, larger-than-life performances in the history of film. And yeah, he drank his milkshake.
I so wish that I had a milkshake and that Matt and I both had milkshakes. As soon as he's like, we would just like start sipping. As soon as we go
I had to mute my phone. I had to mute it because like I knew it was coming. I've known it all week that this line was gonna come. So I had it, but I don't want to f him up. So I was laughing.
Yeah, we should find we should find Shane. You should just find like a picture of a milkshake and just put it up for part of the podcast. But you talked about greed. The character definitely feels like the personification of greed. Maybe because all three of us are. I know you guys very well. We all have empathy. And yeah, Matt, you got a little bit. I think you got a little bit of that thing.
It's growing. It's growing. Don't
Yeah.
judge me by 2020 standards, though.
Right. He is the personification of greed, and I always the scene before. I think it's the sequence before when he's in that very dark room and he's talking to his son, and his son is saying, I'm gonna have a wife, and I'm gonna be, I miss the fields," and he realizes then at that point that his son is basically gonna be competing with him in a sense, and he calls him, you're not my son. Spoiler alert, you're not my son. You are a bastard. You
You're
are
in
a
a basket.
bastard in a basket. And that scene and his whole kind of character arc going into the monologue at the end there is just like, yeah, there's so much going on there. But it shows so well how Daniel Day-Lewis, how great of an actor he really is. The ability to chew the scenery without it falling apart is the thing, is what makes him so great. And I think Paul Dano is very good, but to be more critical of acting, Paul Dano's a fantastic actor, but there are moments in this film where the scenery, he does shoot the scenery, and it is like, okay, you're taking me out of the movie a little bit, especially in the chapel with Paul Dano. But Daniel Day-Lewis, it never feels over the top. It never feels overblown. And to be able to do that is just...
I think
wow.
the level of, because like it's so interesting because you have that performance, and then he only had 3 performances after that before he retired from acting. And one of them was 9. So like he played an Italian director in a musical, and he sings, which
Yeah,
he committed to it.
sure.
But he had Lincoln, which is a completely different performance. And then you have Phantom Thread, which there is so much subtle physical acting in that, where the looks he gives in it, you can just see the boiling over, what's boiling underneath the surface there works so well in that film. And he does that too in There Will Be Blood, because you can just see the look on his face at times, the contempt he has for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many scenes in the film where it kind of lays the groundwork to really make you realize, like, this guy is a sociopath, but you still kind of root the hope that maybe he does actually care about this kid. But there's one point where when that oil blows and that pyre of fire happens, and he leaves his son to go look at it. And when Kieran Hines' character walks up to him and asks him about his son, he's like, is he okay? And you can just see the look in Daniel Day-Lewis's eyes admiring this tower of flame over him. And at that point, he's covered in oil. He's completely black. The sun's gone down. And he's just standing there. No. And like, that's the only response he has. Like, no, his son's not okay. But does he care? And no, he's admiring that oil coming up out of that ground. And just, it makes me sad that he's retired, but obviously it's like, it's his life. He could do whatever he wants. But like, it's sad that I'm not going to see another new Daniel Day-Lewis performance. And it just says how much of an amazing actor he was, that he was like the shoe-in to win Best Actor that year. And the competing film that won Best Picture, No Country for Old Men, like, I think Tommy Lee Jones's performance in that is amazing, and I don't think it gets enough credit.
Yeah, because it's a lot more understated. Yeah,
and it's like every lead performance that year was in the shadow of this mammoth performance that there was no chance in hell anybody else was going to win that Best Actor Oscar. And Daniel Day-Lewis has 3. He could have easily had 4. I think his performance in Phantom Thread was a little too understated to like really stand out to win the Oscar that year. But like he could have won any time he went out there and performed. That's the thing. And I don't know if there's ever going to be somebody like him again.
Not quite like that.
No. Better for worse. Maybe committing that much to a performance is a little too much. But
Yeah.
That's
he's a hell of an artist, and there are very few. Most of the time, I'm the first one to say it's the director that matters, but there are a few exceptions where the actor that's cast changes the entire dynamic of the movie, and I think Daniel Day-Lewis is one of a very select few who you can't. Maybe you just don't do the movie if you don't have Daniel Day-Lewis. You know?
Well, and the interesting thing is because in general, like obviously he did that. I think it was Rob Marshall who did 9, who also did Chicago, and like that was a weird choice for him to take that role as Guido. But like in general, he was extremely picky about what directors he worked with. Like think about just from 2000 on, he worked with Scorsese, which Gangs of New York, at least to me, is a very flawed film. There are certain things about that really do not work for me. But my God, anytime Bill the Butcher's on screen, like he commands it. And then he worked with PTA twice. There Will Be Blood and then Phantom Thread. And that even just shows the versatility of Paul Thomas Anderson with what kind of movies he can do. And then he worked with Spielberg on Lincoln.
Yeah.
And I didn't see Daniel Day-Lewis in any of those performances.
Who the hell is Daniel Day-Lewis?
Right? Like, that's the thing. Because, like, earlier in his career, like, he didn't dive because like he's a leading actor, but he's a character actor. He becomes another person. And like you can see him in like In the Name of the Father. Like he's not completely transforming himself into a different person. Like he still speaks in his accent and he looks like him. Like Last of the Mohicans, that's even a completely different performance for him too. But like you look at Bill the Butcher, there's no Daniel Day-Lewis there. You look at Daniel Plainville, there's no Daniel Day-Lewis there. You look at he was Abraham Lincoln.
He's Abraham Lincoln. Yeah.
And every time like that, I love Lincoln. That movie has left an impact on me to the point where anytime I see a picture of George Washington, I think about the story he tells in that movie where he's like, so Benjamin Franklin went over to England as an ambassador and was in the home of a English lord, and you know, he goes into the bathroom and sees a picture of George Washington. And like Benjamin Franklin comes out and asks, like, why is there a picture of George Washington in the home of a British lord? And the Lord says, nothing makes an Englishman shit quicker than the look of George Washington. And I laugh every time I see George Washington now. Like I was walking through the Princeton Art Museum on campus and they have a giant portrait of George Washington. And that was the first thing that popped in my head is because it's like, it was so genuine and earnest of a performance as Abraham Lincoln and just telling that story. And he's about to say it. And Bruce McGill's character, who's I think is Secretary of State or War, is just like, oh no, you're going to be telling one of them stories again, aren't you? And he just storms out of the room because he's like, I'm not listening to this crap anymore. But like, it's a special actor with a very special monologue. Which,
Absolutely.
how many actors could have made that one work?
Right. Yeah. That's a
So,
tough character to hang with for an entire movie, and then to watch him devolve like that, at the end. Yeah.
uh, well, any other like honorable mentions, quick mentions of other monologues you all like?
Silence of the Lambs has a couple pretty like interesting little pockets of like amazingness. Let me see what else. I don't know. You guys want to like pinball it? There's like what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Tim Roth from Reservoir Dogs with the Commode story is always one I liked.
All that Tarantino, right?
Yeah, of course.
Tarantino knows how to write them. It's interesting because I remember watching Cinefix's top 10 monologues, and they tied, like I already mentioned, the Al Pacino Devil's Advocate one, but they paired that up with De Niro's from Cape Fear, where he's denouncing God and like just going off like he just got the shit kicked out of was going to get the shit kicked out of him and then basically like murders 3 guys and just denounces God. And like obviously you have the great dictator at the end where Charlie Chaplin goes on like a very, very heartfelt, very realistic call against fascism because that came out during World War II. And just because it's like obviously it's a running joke that like villains in movies have monologues and stuff like that. And like I just rewatched Skyfall and the scene where you get introduced to Silva and why am I blanking? Javier Bardem's character, and it's about the rats and the coconuts. And he's just like walking down the hall, and like Roger Deakins shoots the hell out of that movie. And he's just slowly getting bigger as he's telling this seemingly random story to Bond about what like rats will start eating each other when they don't have any more food. And it's basically the life of a spy. It's like they'll take everything from you. And stuff like that. And like made the joke about The Incredibles because it's like Syndrome stops himself from monologuing because it's like, that's the joke. You get caught talking about things and then they get away. Why are you sitting there talking about stuff? But even like I'm trying to think of some by it's funny because a lot of my favorite films don't have a whole lot of like probably the closest thing like of some of my favorite films, like you think about the opening, like I don't know if this really even counts because it's narration, but like the opening of like No Country where Sheriff Tom Bell's telling his story about like the cruelty of the world, honestly, or even at the end where his wife asks him about what he dreamed about. And he's just like, saw my father over there and he was younger. I was like, I'm older than he ever was. And he's standing over there by the fire. And like just even stuff like that. But it's so interesting how great dialogue can be to really set the stage or set a scene or drive home the themes of a film. And it's so hard to make them not feel overtly preachy or heavy-handed because like what like the end of Pulp Fiction, that that whole thing by Jules never feels ham-fisted or heavy-handed, blunt in your face. You start to realize maybe what the themes of the film are at that point because of it.
I think you just touched on something very important. You an actor and director have to work to make the monologue intimate and close. And yes, Jules definitely, at the end, with a director like Tarantino, who some people criticize just for being very heavy-handed, it is very close and intimate and really brings you in, because as an actor, the danger is always to overblow it, and just make it too big. Shakespeare actors, for example, they have more room
Oh
because
my
they're
God. It
on the
just
stage. But
watching Kenneth Branagh's 4-hour Hamlet film is basically like, do you want to watch 4 hours of actors just giving it their all to just basically monologue after monologue after monologue? And like, it's a it's a cinematic treat. Like,
really,
it's a lot. It's a 4-hour movie, but like Kenneth Branagh delivering some of his soliloquies, monologues as Hamlet, or Brian Blessed as the ghost of his father, and like even Charlton Heston as like the leader of like the troupe of actors at that like dinner portraying. It's just like that movie is like capital A acting to like the max. And that's
right.
exactly it. Like, because theater is that. It's supposed to be, you have to be able to fill a room. You have to be able to
Exactly.
fill a theater. Like,
Sure.
you could change the audio on a movie, and some of them need to learn how to turn it down a bit.
True.
Christopher
Yeah.
Nolan.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, but
sometimes you can't hear the dialogue.
yeah, no, even with the Shakespeare is a good example, because he wrote a lot of monologues and soliloquies and such. But I think that the ceiling is a lot higher inside of those theater houses, and so it becomes, you can be bigger, you can be grander. You still have to find a way to make it feel like we're still in the same room. I'm on stage with you. You're talking to me. That relatability, has to be there. Just so I don't forget, I do think it's funny that Matt brought up the American Psycho monologue, and I do think you're talking about the one when he's on the phone at the end inside the office. Is that the one?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just thought about that one again, because it's not so much relatability as it's just like, oh my God, like this, he's
Because
fucking.
that's acting, right? Because there's like the writing of that is awesome. Number one, because you have like that scene doesn't like exist in a vacuum, because like the way American Psycho ends, it goes from like the thriller and almost like turns into like this over the top, like it's like action and explosions and things keep happening, people keep getting killed and more and more and more stuff. And it's not necessarily that he starts to feel bad. He's about what he's done. He's just scared, and he kind of wants to like confess, or just wants us to get it out or share it with somebody finally, like what he does. Like it's interesting like that. I like that. That was the reason why that was my runner up, was because it was so powerful, and like the close up is so awesome. You see like the spit and the sweat on his face, and he's just like just going for it. And he's just kind of like, I killed this person and Hell's Kitchen and that person, and he's just really, that is a fantastic movie. That's a fantastic movie. So
And
yeah.
I think you're right. He is not sympathetic. I never read it as an apology necessarily, but it does feel like a bit of a cry for help. There's a human side. He is basically falling apart and breaking down. And in that scene, he looks like three different people, from start to finish, which he very well may be in his head, three different people. He's so there is an element of me going, oh, this guy's out of his fucking mind. You already know he's out of his mind, but for the first time ever, that humanness, and I think that's the thing that hopefully comes across in a monologue is the humanness, even in the monologue with Daniel Plainview, at the end of There Will Be Blood, because, I don't, yes, I guess a part of me does feel bad for him because, the one person in the world, that could be a child, even this person that this preacher that he ultimately sees as a competitor, there's no like sense of respect. I mean, he kills the man, there's no, sense of respect. Like, oh, okay, yeah, I respect you, like watch the NBA. So like you have respect for your opponent, there's still a human being. None of that. None of that.
Well,
No empathy.
and the thing is, like, how
No.
despicable Daniel Plainview is. Watching that movie, I hate Eli so much. And
Uh-huh.
I don't feel like they spend really any time in that movie trying to build any sympathy for that character.
Yeah.
So, like,
No.
by the end, it's just like, go for it.
Basically,
And basically, he's the only character left in that movie that
yeah.
seems worse than Daniel Plainview.
Because he's dishonest about it. I think there's an honesty to the Plainview character that I think a lot of people end up liking, which you have to be careful. Those characters do end up getting admired in our culture, but when he's drainage, he talks about it like it's his child. He talks about this thing like it's you know like he's his own god, the blood of lamb,
Yep.
so it's very, very scary. It's very, very scary in those cases where, because like with Jules, there's the relatability, and with those two types of monologues, it's like, oh
So,
no.
but it's cool because you sort of like, you get like a way deeper understanding of like the person that's on you. Like I'm surprised like we haven't even talked about that other scene in the same movie when he's talking about I have a competition in me.
Yeah.
Like it
Oh
like,
my
like so
God.
there's like a lot of awesome moments in that movie. It almost kind of reminds me of Alex, when you were talking about Wolf of Wall Street, and we were talking about kind of how like maybe some people might get, at least they might get a different understanding of what the movie might be trying to say when they watch it, and it's like, oh, that's the good guy. Like that's what I'm supposed to be like. That main character, like I'm rooting for him because I want to be that. And then, but then someone else might say like, no, that's not. That's a bad person. That's a really bad person. That's a culmination of a lot of messed up, selfish, like hurtful, hateful, like crazy type stuff. I don't know. It's kind of or like when people watch like Breaking Bad or Scarface or Rick and Morty, and I like all those things, but those aren't good people. Those aren't people that you should like aspire to. You shouldn't aspire to like drink anybody else's milkshake and like give their livelihood and their family the middle finger. But it really is
Basically,
interesting
that's
to
what he
watch.
does. It's like he's
So, yeah.
admitting at the end there, like he stole so much oil from the Sunday family, and without remorse, he's just like, I don't care. What are you
And
gonna
that's a
do about
metaphor
it?
for like real people, and that's like incredibly real, but also like incredibly disturbing, but then
Well, and in
also
that moment,
incredibly real.
because he's just like he stole it from Eli.
Mm.
Because like even earlier in the film, Eli denounces his father as a fool and degrades him in front of his whole family. And like that moment, Matt, that you bring up about where he's talking to his brother, he's like, I have a competition in me and I can't have anyone else win. And that scene in particular, and I actually wrote about that because my senior thesis for my honors program in college was about, it was called A Business Education, how film has changed our society's outlook on business. And that particular scene is shot in a particular way where it's all at night and the only thing lighting up his face is fire. And you just see these flames lighting up his face, and like you just see this dark evilness creep up out of him in that conversation, because some people need to compete and they need to win, but their idea of competition is that they're the only ones that can win. Everyone else has to lose. And that's a lack of empathy.
Right.
Like, you can beat your opponent and want them to be okay afterwards.
Sure.
There's none of that in Daniel Plainview.
Yeah.
And honestly, what sends him over the edge in that film is what happens with him and his brother.
Yeah.
Like, that's the last push.
I always wondered, and maybe and you could tell me maybe if the character's supposed to wonder. I always wondered if that guy was like faking to be his brother, if he was just.
Well, I wasn't going to bring that up, but like he admits that like he met his brother and took his name after his brother died. That's why what happens to that guy happens. And I feel like, because that's such an interesting segment in the film, because it felt like the last chance for humanity for Daniel Plainview was when he was building that relationship with his brother. And then after that betrayal, done. The whole rest of the film, if I remember correctly, because like it is a 2-hour and 45-minute film, and if I'm not mistaken, the rest of that film is just, I don't know exactly how long after that before it jumps in time, because it jumps in time, and that's when he denounces his son, and then the very next scene is when Eli shows up at that mansion. And that's at the point where it just spirals for the rest of the film, because it was his last hope of feeling any kind of human connection. Because in the end, it really turns out that he just used that kid. It was a cute little face for him to bring around for him to sell oil. And like,
it's so tragic. You make me want to cry when you say that, because you know, yes, he is a cute kid, and you could see that there was a connection there, but he didn't feel it. And there's a part of me that wants to believe that he actually felt it. And when you say it that way, it's almost like, no. Even if he did feel it, he pushes that feeling away. Even, you know, anything that's going to get in the way, because if he's like, oh, it's going to get in the way.
And that's the thing, because it's like it's hard to have connections to people and want all the power, because eventually you're going to have to skimp on some power to still have those connections with people. And like, I don't like, it's really hard to think about how much he really connected at all with anybody. But in the end, it's definitely all gone. And he says it himself. He's finished. But we definitely had a lot of interesting monologues to talk about. They went into some dark places.
Yeah, we can.
Oh, wait, one more. Robin Williams, Good Will Hunting, talking about, I don't know why I didn't say that before. Talking about the fact that, like, his painting and his wife, and and the fact that, like, even though that he's like talking to somebody who's extremely smart, his worldview is like the size of a penny, because he hasn't like been anywhere, and he hasn't had to kind of like relate to anything that wasn't familiar and comfortable, like, and that kind of like that puts blinders on Will, and it's really dope. And or the thing in the end where it's like, it's not your fault. That movie has a couple of awesome, or when, but it's not even like emotional at all, when Matt Damon is talking about I think to like an interviewer or something, whether or not he should take the job. Remember that? And he was talking about kind of like, well, if I take this job and I'm kind of like your lab rat calculator, and then like and then like I give you codes, and then these codes end up being connected to like somebody's house getting blown up by a missile. You remember what I'm talking about?
It's like I saw.
It's an awesome movie.
It is a great movie. Yeah, and I watched when I was looking up the monologues you guys would share with me. That came across my feed and my YouTube, that very monologue when they're on the park bench looking at the swan, and Matt Damon says something. What do you got, a thing for swan? What do you got, a fetish? Is that a swan fetish or something like that? And then he goes into that monologue about, like you would quote me Shakespeare if I said something about love, but you've never loved a woman. You've never, it was very powerful and very real. And it's wonderful, when a therapist can be that real with you, and almost offensive, at the same time, and accepting that they be that, they'll push over that line with you. It's very difficult. And, I wish that Robin Williams character could be my therapist sometime. Yeah, no, that was. By the way, I watched the Independence Day monologue twice, Matt, because I thought you were actually going to do the Independence Day monologue.
We're not going to go away into the night.
Quietly into the night. And I wrote it down right here. I wrote down freedom from annihilation to prepare for, all right, okay, you can talk about Independence.
Oh yeah, no, I just put in the group chat that I wanted you to laugh. It's a good mod. It's a good scene.
Well, because here's the thing. There's a lot of like rally cry, like film speeches, and like Lord of the Rings has some great ones.
Braveheart has one.
Like, there'll be a day where the kingdom of men will fall, but it's not this day. This day we fight. And I'm just like, yes.
Oh yeah,
now, just thinking about it. And like Theoden, when he's rallying the Rohirrim to on the Pelennor fields in front of Minas Tirith, they're both out of Return of the King. So great. And like just thinking about, now I'm thinking about Braveheart. And it just like
that came to mind too. Yeah.
They can take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. And
wait, can you do this? Can you scream the freedom thing, Shane, please? I don't know who's in your apartment right now. But
so it's like any last words? Freedom.
Your cat is probably somewhere in the apartment, like, what the hell is going on?
And Gladiator. It's like, what is your name, Gladiator? What's your name? It's like, Gladiator. It's like, how dare you turn your back on me? And he takes his helmet off. I was like, oh, that whole entire thing where he's just like, I'm the leader of the Northern Legions. I am the supporter of the real Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Husband to a murdered wife. Father to a murdered son. And I'll have my vengeance. Just like, oh my God, Russell Crowe.
So these monologues, it's not so much about humanness and focus and kind of what we were all just kind of talking about. Those monologues, and I'm not saying they're bad, they're very good, but they are like the rallying cry. Mm-hmm. They are set up to be badass and inspire you. And so they're not as intimate as they are just like, it's kind of like a Rocky montage, in a Rocky movie. I want to go work out now. It's like, it's very important for that film. And
interesting you bring up Rocky, because I actually quoted this in my best man speech at my brother's wedding.
Oh yeah.
It's like, think Rocky Balboa when he's talking to his son. It's like, it's not about how hard you get hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And just that whole entire thing where his son cares so much about the validation that he gets at work. And at least that one, it's not like a big rallying, like boxing kind of thing. It's something he's getting intimate with his son, and
Yeah.
that conflict he has of like, which you don't expect that out of like Rocky movie, but like it's a really intimate, important moment, him trying to connect with his son. And like at least like the Maximus Decimus Meridius thing and the Braveheart ones, they feel
Yeah.
very over the top, badass. I feel at least the ones in Lord of the Rings, I feel like, especially Aragorn's, it has like a deeper level to like the whole entire themes of humanity throughout all of Lord of the Rings. Because like, if you really think about it, obviously Sauron is evil personified, which is not the most complex, interesting villain. But the ring is. The ring is corruption and
Sure.
what it does to a human being.
Yeah.
And when he says that, like talking about like men will fall. And
Right.
like today we will stand up and fight against this. And I think
Well,
like, go ahead, Alex.
I was going to say, because, because I think of thematically from these monologues we're discussing now, these characters are all facing death in some, imminent death. And, more than likely they are going to die, without a lot of skill and a little bit of luck. They're going to die. And, even the Maximus one, they could slit his throat right then and there. In fact, in real life, that's exactly what happened,
Yeah.
So it's, it's a whole different level of, suspense and, so it's crazy. They, in Lord of the Rings, half of those guys, if not more, are marching toward their death,
A lot of people died in Return of the King. A lot of beings died. Let's put it that way, because I guess technically they're not all people. But there was a lot of dead bodies piled up.
Kind of relates back to, I know Patton was kind of like your honorable mention. I've never seen that film, and being, as we all are, children of a post-Vietnam, baby boomer generation, I'm hearing that dialogue and I'm like, I really want to see this movie because I want to know, is this part satire? Is this part, you know what I mean? Because the red of the American flag is like in my face, and some of the words he's using. But I bring this up because there is an intimacy about that monologue, and there is some of the people he's talking to are going to die for their country. And he's saying, hey, it's kind of like it's one or the other. You've got to make the other one die for their country. And so, but it's not a hoorah speech either. It's more of a like, get your shit. I felt like a get your shit together kind of like.
Well, and that's the thing, because it really sets the tone for the kind of leader he was. Because like the film, from what I understand, is that like the dialogue and everything is very true to who he was as a human being. And how the film is presented, it's our job to take a look at that person and make a judgment if, do we really agree with what he's saying? Because most of the people in the film don't. There's a reason he never progressed past the point he was in the military. Because like other generals like Carl Malden, who's a really great actor, who had a great career of supporting performances in like Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront. He plays what general? Because like he started out below Patton. By the end of the movie, he's higher than Patton. And there's a reason for it. Patton doesn't play by other people's playbooks.
Right. Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that look at that kind of attitude and admire that a lot. And there's other people who think it's dangerous. And you get that in the film. And what's so intimate about the film is, it's about a general during World War II but it's not like The Longest Day or Dunkirk, where it's about the spectacle.
I see.
And like, it's about him. They do have some war scenes, but it's all from his perspective.
Right.
And like, obviously, as a general, you're not going to be like as much on top of it. He was more than most generals would be, because
what year did it come out, Shane?
I feel like I want to say 70. So
Oh,
it came
okay.
out during
All right.
Vietnam.
I thought you were gonna say like 58 or something, but because I didn't know. But I guess I feel dumb. I should have known that. But 70, that changes the conversation and completely.
Yeah, because I don't think he directed it, but Francis Ford Coppola produced it and was heavily involved in the film. And George C. Scott won Best Actor, but he declined the award because he fundamentally did not believe in the Academy Awards. He's like, how do you compare 5 performances of different characters and try to judge which one was a better performance?
I like this guy. Yes.
It's basically like, unless you're going to have us all act the same character and judge us, like,
Right.
it's not the
Right.
same thing. So like, he's one of 2 people to decline his Academy Award for Best Actor.
That's cool.
The other one was Marlon Brando, who sent that young Native American woman up to accept it instead and talk about the plight of the Native American. Yeah, it did come out in 1970.
Yeah, she wasn't a good actress.
Yeah, Francis Ford Coppola wrote it.
I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it.
What, Matt?
I didn't believe it. It took me out.
What, Matt?
Yeah, you should have a microphone just come down from the ceiling and
I,
we need
you know what I mean? Like a Bugs Bunny.
Canned laughter for.
But Francis Ford Coppola wrote the screenplay for it, so that's why he was involved in it.
Really?
And,
okay.
They're based off of a novel about Patton, and it was Carl Malden played Omar Bradley, who was another general in the U.S. Army, who they used his autobiography as well.
Sure.
So, like, it's very much, this film is about Patton, and George Scott carries the whole film.
I need to see it. I need to see it because you reading the YouTube comments, I'd say it sounds like another one of those characters that some people walked away really inspiring. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, he's a real person. So, like, my grandfather admired him a lot.
Right.
Most of his soldiers, very polarizing. They either hated him because, like, he did slap the helmet of a soldier who didn't have any physical injuries, but at the time had what they called shell shock, which is PTSD.
Yeah.
So, like, he didn't get that. So, like, he was a very controversial person, and he wanted to attack Russia right after World War II. He's like, we're here. We need to keep going and take down these commies. And they were just like, go home, George.
Right.
They're just like,
you're drunk. Go home.
Yeah, basically. And that was
it's scary. You can't let people like that continue to make decisions. But I understand why he was very important for the United States Army. I've never been to war, so it's horrifying just the idea. But
the film really focuses on the fact that it's like, this man had an ideal. Like, this was his perspective on things. And countless times the U.S. military pushing him to the side because, like, we're not going to invest in that ideal. And because, like, they used him as bait, as a decoy during D-Day. They sent him south. And how they portrayed in the film is the Germans are like, Patton's their best general. They're going to send him where the attack's going to go. So like he wasn't part of D-Day because they didn't trust him.
That's the thing, when human beings are in that position where it's like do or die, you send the most. You'll send whoever's going to get the job done.
Well, and the thing is, they wound up sending the 3rd Army, 10th Armored Division into Germany, and that's where my grandfather fought in World War II during the Battle of the Bulge. And that was like the last boom. We went into Germany and wrapped up the war. And it's interesting because he was such a strategist. Like he really was. He saw himself as a Scipio Africanus, a Hannibal Barca. Like he saw himself as a legendary soldier. And that wasn't what you're trying to work well with the British. It was about a team effort, and he didn't really play like a team. So it's a very interesting film. And that speech at the beginning, you know who you're following in this film based off that speech.
Right.
So any other thoughts on Monologues before we wrap up?
To be or not to be?
That is the question.
Yeah. So
it would have been so corny if you had like a skull like already.
I have a picture of a guitar. To be or not to be? That's more appropriate for me, I think.
To be or not to be? That is the question. I think of like Billy Madison. Where you just like the whole outfit. He has the slug and everything. To sleep. To sleep. No more. And they're all like clapping. On that note, thank you all for tuning in to the Development Hell podcast. And thank you for supporting Alex, Matt, and Shane, your Wasteland reviewer.